We have been to Saranda 3 times in the last 4 years. We recently spent 3 months living there from the beginning of March until the end of May. Over the time that we've spent in Saranda, we've noticed several pros and several cons about being in Saranda. And today we're going to give you that list. We've got 10 of each today. That's right. We'll start with the pros. Number 1 pro for us is the oceanside views and the climate. I mean, it's a spectacular area. The climate, Mediterranean, when we arrived at March in the beginning, wasn't necessarily the best time for weather, but in the 3 months we were there, we had temperatures that ranged from 16 to 32 degrees, and of the 90 days that we were there, we only had 12 days that had precipitation in them. So really, the weather was really outstanding. Agreed?
It was very nice.
Absolutely.
Second is the local transportation. We stayed a little bit outside of town. We were in the Mango Beach area, which is a bit of a tourist destination, but not necessarily a local destination. So we were about a 25-minute walk from the promenade and the downtown area. There's a great local bus service that runs, when we were there, about once an hour. It leaves from the end of the promenade and it goes right through to Semil and Butrint, which we used several times, both with just to get back to our apartment with the groceries. I also went on a hike, or 2 hikes, one out of Semil, one out of Butrint with a local hiking group. We did go see Butrint. We spent a day in Semil. We got lots of use out of the local bus. It runs anywhere from 100 lek to 200 lek, depending on your destination. It always leaves right on time. It's very regular. In addition to the local bus, there's lots of intercity buses that you can catch from a single location in town that go to destinations such as Gjirokastër, Butrint, Berat, and closer local places like Delvin, etc.
Yeah, exactly. The bus system there is actually not too bad. The next pro about Saranda is the friendly people that are there. You know, the locals really go out of their way to make you feel welcome. You know, in some places you visit or you stay, sometimes you really kind of feel quite isolated. But in this place, you know, people are friendly, and especially if you learn, you know, some of the basic Albanian words for, you know, hello, thank you, where is this, how much is that? You know, they're really accommodating and they're just beautiful people. I mean, in Albania entirely, one of the best points is the people, and Saranda is no exception.
The next pro is lots of green market veggies. Every little market has a veggie display outside. Some of the quality there is excellent. There's also a local green market with various vendors where you can go down and see what's in season, what's fresh. There was one gal in particular that I frequented a lot in the green market, and like the friendly people comment, once you get to know people, you know, you get an extra handful of green beans in your bag when you buy your stuff, or you know, a couple things slipped in free of charge after you pay. So it's a really good experience, and there was such a great variety of produce and fruit there. I was really amazed, especially coming in at kind of the end of winter, beginning of spring. Got to see things come into season like broad beans, baby artichokes. We cook a lot at home, and so it was a really good experience to have this huge array of fresh vegetables at our beck and call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, one of the other pros about Saranda is that if you don't want to cook at home, there are a lot of places to eat. You know, we've listened to people talk about how it's hard to find places open sometimes in the off season, and while that can be true, if you do get walking around in the city, there are lots of places to eat. You'll always find something that's open, you know, and the food is really good. It's really fresh, the quality is good, and the prices are incredibly reasonable for what you're getting, right?
Yeah, good value.
Absolutely.
The next pro is there's a lovely promenade oceanside for walking. We walk the promenade almost daily. We would most days walk into town from our apartment, do a full lap of the promenade before we did our shopping or go to a restaurant or sit down at a cafe. The best thing about the promenade is everybody seems to do the same thing, and so once you're there for a while and you've met some people, you always run into somebody you know on the promenade. So it's a very inclusive feeling. You feel like you're part of the community, and it's pretty special.
Yeah, that's right. We went there every day. We really liked it. And that, leads us into the next pro is that Saranda is a very walkable city. It really doesn't matter where you stay in Saranda. You can walk to whatever it is that you want to do. It can start to get a little hilly when you go from the promenade up into the higher areas. But for the most part, down in the center of town, everything is there. And, we stayed about a 30-minute walk away from the main city core. And we enjoyed that walk in and out every day, with the exception of, like Sarah was saying, with the bus rides to maybe carry groceries if we were bringing something in from, a different area there. So very walkable, and especially, like Sarah said, the promenade is amazing.
So the next pro is, back to the bus system. It's easy to do day trips and overnight trips to attractions close by. So we did a day trip to Girocaster. We did an overnight trip to Barat, both on the bus. Very easy to get there and back. Not too long to sit on the bus. Nice scenery while you're on the bus. Very, very centrally located. And of course, the archaeological site at Butrint is right there in a local bus ride away. And definitely worth doing if you're in Saranda.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, we did videos on our trips to Barat and Girocaster. If you look back in our playlist or catalog, you'll see them there. And it shows what those places are about. And really, the trips, the actual bus fare to go to those places was pretty reasonable, right?
It was, yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. So one more pro about Saranda, and this may not be applicable for everybody, but for us it was a big pro. And that is the good expat community that exists in Saranda. There are a number of people that stay there for extended periods of time, often Americans for up to a year. And you start to get to know a lot of people if you're there for any little period of time. And we really enjoyed the camaraderie, the friendships that we made and built. And, some friendships that will last forever, I'm sure. That was really great, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really added something to our Saranda experience. And, it was really nice to be able to make plans, meet people for lunch. We went on some day trips, some overnight expeditions with friends we met. It just adds a different dynamic to just being a couple there alone. Yeah,
that's right. We took a boat trip with some friends, did a video about that one as well if you're interested. It was great. So, the expat community there really makes that place special if that's what you're looking for. And it doesn't take away from the local experience, but it does add something if you're looking for people that are speaking English and want to share stories about maybe their travels around the world. It was a real bonus.
Yeah. And the last pro we have is, like all cities in Albania, it is very safe. Because we were there for so long, we got 2 keys to our apartment, and I didn't hesitate to go out without Jay, even if I was going to be out in the evening after dark. You can walk around. It's very, very safe, just both as foreigners and as a single female walking around. Albania in general is really, really good that way.
Yeah, totally. It's a safe city for sure.
So you can't have pros without cons, and there are some cons. Moving on to those, the first one is Saranda is more expensive than pretty much everywhere else in Albania. It's a tourist town. It's fully open only for a few months of the year, and they're trying to make their money for those few months of the year. So everything from groceries to restaurants to beverages in a cafe are going to be more expensive than Tirana, Barat, Girocaster, Shkodra, any of those places. You notice that in the grocery store, you notice that on restaurant menus. It's just you're paying for the scenery and being in a tourist location.
And that leads into the next con, which is that, if you're there in the off season and not there during the peak season, not everything is open. And in the area where we selected to stay, when we arrived there, virtually all of the businesses in that area were closed. A few cafes were open, all the restaurants were closed, vacant hotels, vacant apartment buildings, which was okay with us. I mean, we were prepared to walk into town. We knew this going into it because we'd already been to Saranda a few times. But even in the city, along the promenade, there's restaurants that aren't open yet. So it does there's some limits to what's available to you. But if you arrive in the peak season, everything's going to be there. It'll just be, incredibly crowded, right? So, just be forewarned if you come outside of that peak, that you don't have everything available to you. And I think, when we arrived in March, April, it changed a bit. And then at the beginning of May, stuff really started to open up a bit, right?
Yeah. It should be noted, we did have one supermarket that was open close to us. So if we needed to run out for milk or bread or something, it was a 5-minute walk. So we weren't completely isolated. But
No, exactly. It's just if you wanted to go to a local restaurant where we were, there really wasn't much open.
I think there was one across the street, and we never actually ended up there.
Yeah, we didn't actually go there, but that's okay. Anyway, so yeah, that's a con for sure. Yeah.
The other con is that the neighborhood you stay in, the amenities really differ. And so like Jay said, we're here sort of on the shoulder season. But even where we stayed, there wasn't a lot of like little local markets. There were a couple supermarkets. There was a burek place that never did open before we left. But one of the things I really appreciate in Albania is, you have your little produce place, you have your dairy that just has your milk and eggs and cheese, you've got your meat store that just has the meat. And those are sprinkled around, but they're mostly located in the Kodra area. So if that's something that's important to you, you need to stay a little bit closer to that. The area where we were, we had to walk right into town if we wanted to find those real sort of local shopping experiences and not just go to the supermarket.
Yeah, that's right. The Kodra neighborhood really has a lot of that local kind of stuff, and it touches up against the city center there, and where we were sort of more towards Mango Beach, en route to what would be Samil. It's more modern construction, it's more built up, it's more recent, but there's just not enough people living in that area during the slower times to support those kind of businesses. So I think next time we would probably stay more in the Kodra area for sure, just so that those things were like sort of right on our doorstep.
Yeah, and if you're eating out all the time, that may not be important to you. But if you want to get that local shopping experience to cook at home, location's important.
Mm-hmm. Another con is that beyond the promenade, it's not really a beautiful city. The promenade is nice, it's clean, but in the city itself, there's not a lot of interesting architecture or buildings. All of the new stuff that's being built or has been built in the last 20 years. Lots of just giant boxes, lots of incomplete construction that seems to be abandoned. And it just, compared to other places, it's, there's no old town area to kind of look at. And stuff in general just it's not really visually appealing. Yeah, for sure.
One more con is that the food variety is limited, and this is both in terms of restaurants and what you can find to cook in the supermarket or the meat stores. And that's common for a lot of Albania, actually. If you get to Tirana, there's a wider variety of food available, both to buy and restaurants. But here, most of the restaurants serve traditional food. You've got similar items on the menus. Everything is really good, really fresh, really tasty, but not a lot of variety. And if you're here for 2 or 3 weeks, that may not be a big issue. If you're here for months, you notice it for sure.
Yeah. I mean, everywhere you go, you see signs, traditional food, sometimes 3 or 4 in a couple of blocks. And, eventually you're pretty tired of that sort of stuff. And, there's a lot of other options. I mean, there's lots of sort of pizza and Mediterranean pasta, seafood and stuff like this. But food variety is limited in restaurants, and food variety can be limited in smaller grocery stores. There is a larger grocery store that we found that does have a lot more. But yeah, in general.
Yeah.
Fair statement.
And again, the seasonality of the town. There are a few signs for sushi restaurants up. Only one of them opened while we were here. I went and had some dumplings there, which was a nice change. But yeah, it's pretty limited.
Yeah, and if you're looking for beef like you might find in North America, like for a steak or whatnot, it's generally not available. Most of that would be imported. Very hard to find. Most of the stuff that's being sold as beef is veal. It's young male slaughtered dairy cows, and so the beef selection is disappointing. The other stuff, poultry and stuff, is actually very good.
Yeah, and we're from the west coast of Canada, a Vancouver area, so we're used to a very, very multicultural society as far as dining.
Yeah.
You're not going to find Indian food here. You're not going to find most Asian food here. You can find a few ingredients in the specialty store, but they are expensive, and it's an incomplete selection.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So the next con, and this is a big one, is construction noise. And my understanding is that in the peak summer season there is a moratorium on this stuff, but the construction noise in Saranda is crazy. And depending on where you end up staying, if you're booking your thing in advance, sight unseen, you could be staying in a property that has something being built next door with power tools, power chisels, jackhammers, going constantly. And I don't know. We were very lucky where we stayed that we really didn't have too much of that. But on our walk into the city on a daily basis, I thought to myself, I would not want to have been a person that had rented in that place there because of what's going on next door. It could be a real ruiner for your time there. So my suggestion actually is to show up, get some. If you're staying longer term, get something short term, a couple of weeks, maybe a week. Find a local agency to show you some places to look at, and then you can make sure that wherever you're going to be isn't going to be near any of that, because it's really, it's ongoing. It's crazy. So fair warning on that one.
And related to that, not directly related to that, but one of the other cons is the traffic here. And it's bad for a couple of reasons. One is there's so much construction and the infrastructure hasn't kept up. So there are way more cars here than the roads can support. And then to add to that, while we were there, they were ripping up all of the streets in the downtown area and repaving them. And so there were detours, and it was, we don't have a car here, so it wasn't that big a deal for us, except you get stuck on the bus sometimes behind a traffic snarl. But just crossing the street sometimes, like you would have to wait forever for a break in traffic because, so many streets had been detoured in one way, and it was just crazy. And my understanding is that once peak tourist season hits, the generally easy drive to places like Semil and Butrint becomes nasty too. It just gets, jammed right up for up to an hour. So
yeah, and the drivers there are typical of a lot of Albania. Just passing over the center line into oncoming traffic, around blind corners. You have to pay attention. It's just kind of the way it is, right? So the next con is it's a cash only city for the most part. There are very few places that will accept a credit card. The only place we were able to use a credit card was at the grocery store. So why this is a con is because in order to get cash, you need to go to an Albanian bank machine, which is fine. But then they hand you out these 5,000 lek notes. And these notes are so large that the moment you take them to somewhere to spend them, to buy some produce at a stand, or even something at a restaurant, maybe you're having a small thing, they don't want to take the bill because they don't want to have to make change for it. And this is a really big problem that exists in that city. We've heard from countless other people that are there, expats and tourists, frustrations about getting spit out these bills and nobody wanting to break change for them when they went to do whatever they were doing with the money. And you don't want to line up in an Albanian bank to make change. That I can assure you. Yeah. So
So, keeping small bills was almost a full-time job for me. I would think ahead, how am I going to break this 5,000 lek note? And then how am I going to keep this small change for as long as possible? And then, where's the next opportunity to break a large note, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to constantly be ahead of it. Otherwise, you're sitting somewhere and you've got money, but you can't pay.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Cash only is what it is.
So the next con is that Saranda does not have its own airport. So the nearest airport in Albania is the international airport at Tirana, which is several hour drive away, either by bus or by car. And it would be the most inexpensive place to fly into, but then you have to get down here. There is an international airport at Corfu. You can land in Corfu and take the hydrofoil over. Generally, flights into Corfu, unless you can get a really good deal out of maybe Britain, are more expensive than flights in Tirana, in our experience. And then again, you've got to figure out the schedule for the hydrofoil. When we got here in March, there was only one boat a day over from Corfu. By the time we left in May, there were several a days.
Yeah. And it should be mentioned that they are building a new airport in Vlore. I think it's supposed to open when?
I think next year.
Sometime next year. So that should definitely, make some big changes in terms of accessing this area. With that will also mean more tourists.
And more traffic.
And I don't see that there's enough infrastructure here or to support it. I don't see how it'll happen, but a good portion of this town is vacant for most of the year, and so I guess there's lots of rooms, and time will tell.
Yeah.
So the final con that we have is accessibility, and this comes around things like sidewalks and so forth. If you are able challenged, you maybe have difficulty walking. If you were to be in a wheelchair, it would be very difficult to get around this place. The sidewalks in many places are in terrible condition, and it's just not very accessible. Even if you were to be in an area where there's decent sidewalks down on the promenade, if you were in a wheelchair, there would be no accessibility to you to a large part of what is in the city.
Yeah. A lot of areas, the sidewalks are maybe big enough for one person, and then they've got trees planted in the middle of them. So you've got to step off the curb into the traffic lane just to get around the tree and the sidewalk. Like it's not very well planned out necessarily.
No, and I guess one point to that also that's an additional con is that there's only one public bathroom in Saranda on the promenade. So you have restaurants, you have bars, you're walking around, there's only one place to go, and it's not very good. So means you need to sit down and order something and use the bathroom wherever you're staying. So anyway, that sort of concludes our extensive list of pros and cons, and let's have a little bit of a discussion around a conclusion about what we think of Saranda overall. So we've listed a number of pros, a number of cons, and some people might think, wow, we're being really critical of this place. So what I'd like to say is that, we really love Saranda, and, we're coming back.
Oh, absolutely. We were so sad to leave Saranda, and the only reason we did is, as Canadians, we can only stay 90 days and 180, and we had to save a couple days for transit back through Albania, because at some point we'll be going to Kosovo and might need them. So we left at day 87, so we've got a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah.
But it was a very, very sad departure for us. We absolutely loved our stay.
Yeah, absolutely. Saranda, we really, it has a real sweet spot for us, and it's definitely on our list. We'll definitely be back to stay, and we just can't say enough about how really the experience is so great once you get there. You just need to look past some of the cons, and really the pros make it worthwhile. It's a really interesting, quirky environment. There's a lot to see, the mountains, the ocean, the people, just walking, people watching. It's one of the better destinations we've been to. Do you agree?
I do. And I think you have to look at the cons more in terms of knowing what to expect so it
Yeah.
doesn't surprise you, as opposed to these are reasons why
Yeah.
you shouldn't go there.
Yeah, exactly. These are reasons that you shouldn't come. These are things, like if you're coming, just be aware, these are kind of things that we see as being cons. And, it may not be the same for everybody. We're just sharing our experience. So we hope you've enjoyed listening to our pros and cons about Saranda. We did one earlier in October of last year about Tirana when we stayed there. And we're going to continue to do videos like this about the places we stay so that we can share our experience with you to give you an opportunity to kind of see, what we feel about it and maybe what you might think about it so that you can enjoy your travels as much as we do, right?
Yeah. And one of the questions that we asked at the end of our Tirana pros and cons is,
Right.
could you live there?
Yeah, could you live there? And so the question of, could you live in Saranda full-time as an expat?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. This is the first time in my life I wished I was an American, because they can stay for a year and I can only stay for 90 days. And if I could stay there for a year, I'd still be there today. And yeah, it's just a great place.
Yeah.
My name's Jay.
And I'm Sarah.
We're a couple of Canadians traveling the world full-time. We're hoping to share our experiences with you to inspire you to perhaps have the same kind of lifestyle that we're existing with today. What do you think, Sarah?
I think if you can do it, you should.
Absolutely. We'll see you in the next one.
Mirapavsham.
Mirapavsham.